Hey everyone! Welcome back to English Medium. Today, we're practicing English through conversation about a phrase people say all the time. Everything happens for a reason. It sounds simple, but the meaning can feel comforting, confusing, or even a little painful, depending on when you hear it.
Yeah, and that's why it's such a good topic for English learners. The phrase is short, but the emotions behind it are not short at all. When people say it, they may be trying to help, but the listener might hear it as advice, judgment, or just a way of avoiding the hard part.
Exactly. So let's be honest from the beginning. When you hear that sentence, do you feel calm, annoyed, hopeful, or maybe all three at once? A lot of expressions in English are like that. The words are easy, but the meaning changes because of tone, timing, and context.
Right, and context is everything. If somebody says it after a small setback, it might feel encouraging. If they say it after a breakup, a job loss, or a serious disappointment, it can feel too neat, almost like they're trying to close the conversation before you're ready.
And that's the part people don't always see. Sometimes you aren't asking for a lesson. You aren't looking for a silver lining. You just want space to feel upset for a minute, or 5 minutes, or maybe 5 days. That need is real, and it deserves respect.
Absolutely. There's a big difference between feeling something and explaining something. Feelings arrive first. Explanations usually come later, if they come at all. And when people skip over the feeling and jump straight to the explanation, the listener can feel unseen.
That word unseen matters. To feel seen means to feel understood, acknowledged, and not rushed. In English, that phrase is powerful because it describes emotional support without making the situation disappear. You don't erase pain by naming a reason too quickly.
Yeah, and sometimes the attempt to find meaning is really just our brains trying to reduce uncertainty. Humans dislike randomness. We want patterns, causes, and a story that connects the dots. It's almost like the mind says, please give me a shape so this doesn't feel like chaos.
That's such a good way to put it. Chaos is hard to sit with. When life feels unstable, people often reach for certainty, even if the certainty is only partial. A reason can feel like a handrail. It doesn't fix the staircase, but it gives you something to hold on to while you move.
And maybe that is why the phrase survives. It gives people a language for coping. But coping is not the same as understanding. Sometimes a comforting sentence helps you survive the moment, and sometimes the same sentence becomes irritating when you need honesty more than comfort.
Let's slow down and look at the vocabulary here, because it's useful in everyday English. We've got comfort, context, timing, support, uncertainty, and coping. These are all words people use when talking about emotions, relationships, and the way we make sense of difficult experiences.
And one of the most important words is perception. Perception means the way you see or understand something. Two people can go through the same event and walk away with completely different perceptions. One person sees failure, another sees a detour, and both reactions can feel real.
Yes, and perception can change over time. What feels like the end of the world on Monday can feel like a turning point 6 months later. That doesn't mean the pain was fake. It means your understanding grew. English has so many ways to describe this slow shift.
I like that idea. Because it feels honest. It doesn't force meaning too early. It allows meaning to emerge later, after reflection. Reflection is another great word here. It means thinking carefully about something, often after some time has passed and your emotions are less loud.
And that's a good distinction. At first, emotions are loud. They take up all the space. Later, reflection can speak more clearly. Sometimes you look back and realize a situation changed your direction, but at the time, you couldn't see that at all. The lesson wasn't visible yet.
Which leads us to the big question. Does the reason exist first, or do we create it later? Some people believe life is guided, that there is a purpose behind every turn. Others believe life is random, and meaning is something humans build afterward. Both views appear in everyday conversation.
And honestly, both views can sound reasonable, depending on what someone has lived through. If a person has experienced a painful event that eventually led to a better path, they may feel the phrase deeply. If they're still in the middle of the pain, they may reject it completely.
That's why timing is so important. The same words can feel supportive or careless depending on when they're spoken. Timing is a subtle thing, but in real conversations, it changes everything. A sentence said too early can feel like pressure. The same sentence later may feel like wisdom.
Let's make that practical with an example. Imagine you apply for a job you really want. You prepare carefully, practice answers, and wait with hope. Then you get rejected. In that moment, the phrase, "everything happens for a reason," may sound empty because all you can feel is disappointment.
Yeah, and disappointment can be heavy. It can affect confidence and make you question yourself. You may start asking, "What did I do wrong?" Or "Was I not good enough?" Those are real thoughts, and they don't disappear just because someone says a nice sentence.
But later, maybe months later, another door opens. Maybe you find a role that suits you better, or a place where your strengths fit more naturally. Then you may look back and say, "Okay, now I see why that first one didn't work." That's meaning arriving later.
And even then, we should be careful not to rewrite the past too neatly. It's tempting to say, "See, it was all perfect," but life is messier than that. The first rejection may still have hurt. The later opportunity doesn't erase the earlier pain. It only gives it another shape.
That's such an important point. Not everything painful turns into something beautiful. Some experiences stay painful. Some situations remain unfair. English needs room for that honesty. If we only use optimistic language, we can accidentally dismiss real suffering.
Exactly. And dismissive language can make people feel like their emotions are inconvenient. But emotions are not inconveniences. They're information. They tell us what matters to us, what hurts, what we value, and where we need support from other people.
Support is a great word, too. Sometimes support means helping someone solve a problem. Sometimes it means simply staying present. In a tough moment, people often need presence before advice. They need someone who listens without trying to fix everything immediately.
That kind of listening takes patience. It also takes humility, because you admit that you do not control the other person's experience. You can't force them to feel better on your schedule. You can only offer space, honesty, and a steady kind of care.
That's very real. And it connects to another phrase we used earlier, feel seen. If someone feels seen, they feel recognized as a whole person, not just a problem to solve. That is one reason the phrase "everything happens for a reason" can sometimes miss the mark.
Because it can sound like the speaker is moving toward a conclusion while the listener is still standing in the middle of the storm. And when you are in the storm, you do not necessarily want a conclusion. You want shelter, or at least someone standing beside you.
We should also talk about nuance, because this topic is full of it. Nuance means small but important differences in meaning or feeling. A phrase can be sincere in one moment and frustrating in another. The words stay the same, but the emotional weight changes.
Right. And that's why good English communication is not only about vocabulary. It's about tone, timing, and relationship. The exact same sentence can sound kind, cold, wise, tired, or defensive. The listener is always reading more than the dictionary definition.
Let's say it another way. When someone says, "everything happens for a reason," the sentence itself is not always the problem. Sometimes the problem is that the sentence arrives before trust has been built. Without trust, even beautiful words can feel flat or forced.
True. Trust changes everything. If a close friend says it with genuine care, you may hear comfort. If a stranger says it too quickly, you may hear a shortcut. The meaning doesn't live only in the words. It lives in the relationship around the words.
Now I want to introduce another useful idea: unresolved. Something unresolved is not fully settled, healed, or understood. Many difficult experiences stay unresolved for a long time. That does not mean you failed. It just means you're still processing what happened.
And processing takes time. People often want emotional progress to be neat, like a checklist. But healing is not a checklist. It's more like a path with pauses, backtracks, and moments where you think you're fine, then suddenly you're not fine at all.
That's so true. Real life doesn't follow a perfect structure. It is not problem, lesson, happiness in a straight line. Sometimes it's problem, confusion, more confusion, a little insight, then another wave of emotion. That's why simple slogans can feel unrealistic.
Still, slogans exist for a reason. People like them because they are easy to remember and easy to repeat. But easy to repeat does not always mean easy to live with, and a sentence can be memorable without being complete.
Exactly. One of the hardest things in life is learning to sit with incomplete understanding. You don't always get a clean answer. You don't always get closure. Sometimes you just learn to keep walking while the meaning slowly forms behind you.
That's a beautiful image, and it connects to the word lingering. Lingering means staying longer than expected. A feeling can linger, a memory can linger, even a question can linger in your mind. Some experiences leave marks that don't disappear quickly.
And those lingering feelings are not necessarily bad. They show that something mattered. If an experience lingers, it may mean it touched a deep part of you. Of course, lingering pain can be exhausting too, so we still need compassion for ourselves.
Compassion is key. It lets you tell the truth without being harsh. You can say, "This hurt me," without adding, "and I should already be over it." That second sentence often makes the pain worse. People heal better when they stop demanding perfection from themselves.
I love that. Perfection is a trap in emotional life. It makes people think there is a correct timeline for grief, disappointment, or recovery, but there isn't. Two people can face similar events and still heal in completely different ways and at completely different speeds.
Exactly. And that is why comparisons are dangerous. When you compare your process to someone else's, you may assume you are behind. But you're not behind. You're just on your own timeline. That can be hard to accept, but it's also freeing.
Freedom is a good word there. Once you stop forcing a lesson, you can start noticing what actually helps. Maybe it's talking to a friend. Maybe it's writing things down. Maybe it's going for a walk, or sleeping, or simply allowing yourself to feel sad without shame.
And from a language point of view, those are useful ways to express emotional reality. I'm processing it. I'm still hurt. I'm trying to make sense of it. These are all natural, human phrases. They sound honest because they are honest.
Let's pause on make sense of. To make sense of something means to understand it in a way that feels organized or meaningful. Many people spend a lot of time trying to make sense of difficult events, even when the answer never becomes fully clear.
Yes, and sometimes the best you can do is partial understanding. That's okay. Partial understanding is still understanding. It may not solve everything, but it can reduce confusion enough for you to take the next step.
That next step matters. A painful event can freeze someone emotionally, making them feel stuck. But over time, small steps return. You talk, rest, reflect, and move a little. Then, one day, you realize the pain is still there, but it doesn't control the whole room anymore.
That's a great description. And it also shows why people use the phrase, come to terms with. To come to terms with something means to slowly accept it, not because you like it, but because fighting reality forever becomes exhausting and unhelpful.
Acceptance is often misunderstood. It does not mean approval. It does not mean saying the event was good. It means stopping the battle against what already happened, so your energy can go toward living instead of only resisting.
That distinction is huge. Acceptance can create space for peace, and peace is different from happiness. Peace may be quieter. It may not look exciting from the outside, but internally, it can feel like finally setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying too long.
And that bag image is perfect because pain can become heavy, even when no one else sees it. Sometimes people around you think you are okay because you're functioning, working, laughing, or answering messages. But inside, you may still be carrying something unresolved.
Which is why being gentle in conversation matters so much. You never know what someone is carrying. So if a person says something like, everything happens for a reason, it's wise to ask whether the listener wants comfort, silence, advice, or just company.
That's such practical communication advice. Ask first, if possible. Listen first, if possible. Then speak. That order saves a lot of misunderstandings. It also makes English feel less like a set of rules and more like a real human tool for connection.
And connection is the big theme here. Language is not only for information, it's for showing care, building trust, and sharing life stories. Even a difficult phrase can help people connect if it's used thoughtfully. But it can also create distance if it's used too fast.
That's why we keep coming back to nuance. Nuance helps us avoid extremes. It reminds us that a phrase can be helpful in one situation and unhelpful in another. The answer is rarely all good or all bad. It's usually somewhere in between.
That middle ground is where real communication lives. In the middle, you can hold two truths at once. The phrase may offer comfort, and the phrase may also feel frustrating. The speaker may mean well, and the listener may still be hurt. Both can be true.
And when two truths can exist together, conversations become more honest. You don't need to force a single emotional response. You can say, I understand why people say that, and also say, I don't want to hear it right now. That's balanced, mature English.
Let's bring in another phrase, draw meaning from. To draw meaning from something means to find value, insight, or understanding in an experience. Not every experience gives meaning immediately, but over time you may draw meaning from it in a way that changes you.
And that meaning can be transformative. Transformative means causing deep change. A painful situation can transform your priorities, your perspective, or the way you treat other people. It can make you more careful, more empathetic, or more patient.
But we should repeat one caution. Transformation is not guaranteed. Not every pain produces growth. Sometimes pain just hurts. Sometimes it wounds. And it's important not to shame people by telling them every hardship must become a gift.
Yes, that would be unfair. It turns suffering into a performance. People may then feel pressured to find a lesson before they have even survived the event emotionally. That pressure is unnecessary. Healing can be quiet, slow, and imperfect.
Exactly. Quiet healing is still healing. And maybe that's the main thing we want listeners to understand. The phrase, everything happens for a reason, is not always wrong, but it is not always enough. Real life needs more than one sentence.
So, if we wanted to say it in a more human way, we might say, "This doesn't make sense yet." That sentence leaves room for pain, uncertainty, and future understanding. It doesn't pretend to have the answer. It simply admits that the answer may come later.
I like that. And another honest option is, I'm still figuring out what this means. That's a very natural English sentence. It tells the truth without forcing closure. It also sounds like a real person speaking, which is exactly what we want in conversation.
Right, because learning English is not just about vocabulary lists. It's about learning how people actually sound when they talk about life. People hesitate, repeat themselves, pause, and change direction. Real speech is messy, and that messiness is part of its beauty.
And speaking of messiness, let's not be afraid of it. A messy feeling can still produce a meaningful conversation. Sometimes the most useful thing you can say is not a polished answer, but a simple admission. I don't know yet, but I'm thinking about it.
That admission is powerful because it gives space for growth. It allows uncertainty to exist without panic. And in English, that kind of sentence is incredibly useful. It lets you stay honest, stay open, and stay connected to the other person.
Another phrase worth reviewing is inevitable. Something inevitable is bound to happen. People often use this word when looking back on events that felt sudden at the time but seem obvious later. In hindsight, the signs can feel very clear.
Yes, hindsight is interesting. It can make a chain of events look neat after the fact. But while you're living through it, nothing feels neat. That's why hindsight can be helpful, but also misleading if we pretend the original moment was easy to understand.
That's a good warning. We should not let hindsight erase confusion. Confusion is part of the story, too. If something felt confusing, then it was confusing. That truth deserves respect. We don't need to rewrite the emotional history to make it more comfortable.
And that honesty creates trust. When you speak honestly about pain, people often feel safer opening up as well. That's how conversations deepen, not by pretending everything is fine, but by allowing people to tell the truth in a way that feels manageable.
Which brings us back to the original sentence. Maybe its value is not in giving a final explanation. Maybe its value is in starting a conversation about meaning, hope, and acceptance. If it starts that conversation, it can be useful, even if it doesn't settle the matter.
I agree. A sentence can be a doorway, not the destination. Everything happens for a reason may open a discussion about belief, coping, disappointment, or growth. But the real work happens after the sentence, when people explain what they actually feel.
And that's where language practice becomes real-life practice. You learn how to say, I'm hurt, I'm unsure, I'm trying to understand, or I need time. These are not just English phrases. They are emotional tools that help you move through life.
So, if we review the core idea, it's this. Some people find comfort in the phrase, some find friction, and many feel both. There is no single emotional answer. There is only the honest answer of the moment, and that can change as time passes.
And changing is okay. In fact, changing is often the sign that you're processing, reflecting, and growing. If your answer shifts from, I hate that phrase, to, I can understand why people say it, that's not inconsistency. That's development.
Beautifully said. Development, reflection, perception, nuance, acceptance. These words all help us talk about life more precisely. Precision matters because vague language can flatten experience. When we choose our words carefully, we honor the complexity of what people really feel.
And that's one of the best parts of learning English. You're not just memorizing words, you're learning how to describe the human experience with more care. You're learning how to say something gentle without sounding fake, and something honest without sounding cruel.
That balance is what we want. Gentle and honest, supportive and truthful, calm and real. If your English can do that, then it becomes much more than grammar. It becomes a way to connect with other people in a meaningful, respectful way.
And maybe that's the reason behind today's episode, if we want to use that phrase carefully. Not to prove one belief right and another wrong, but to practice language that can hold complexity. That's a very adult skill, and an important one.
So, before we wrap up, let's review a few useful words one more time. Perception, nuance, unresolved, lingering, accept, reflect, and transform. These words help you talk about emotions and experiences in a deeper, more natural way.
And don't forget, come to terms with, draw meaning from, and make sense of. Those phrases show up all the time in real conversations, especially when people are talking about difficult moments and the slow process of understanding them.
If you can use these phrases confidently, you can express thoughts that are more personal and more precise. That helps you sound natural, but it also helps you think more clearly about your own experiences. Language shapes thought in subtle ways.
Exactly. And when language shapes thought, better words can lead to better conversations, and better conversations can lead to more compassion. That's a pretty amazing chain reaction for something as small as a sentence, isn't it?
It really is. So maybe our final answer is not that everything happens for a reason we always know. Maybe the better answer is that some things only become understandable after we live through them, reflect on them, and slowly build meaning around them.
And sometimes, even then, the full meaning never becomes complete. But that's okay too. Not every story needs a perfect ending. Sometimes the most honest ending is simply, I'm still here, I'm still learning, and I'm still moving forward.
That feels like the right place to end. Honest, patient, and human. Thanks for listening with us today, and thanks for practicing these ideas in English. We hope this conversation helps you speak more naturally about hard topics and real feelings.
And remember, if life feels confusing right now, you don't need to force a final reason today. You can take your time, ask better questions, and let meaning arrive slowly. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.